We don't endorse candidates. We don't even care whom you vote for. We just want you to have all the facts. That said, here are the top 5 claims this season that blatantly ignored them. Meek is referring to the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, a bill that both Rubio and Crist have spoken out against at times. In a campaign where candidates need to be held to the highest standard of accuracy, Crist's claims just stretch the truth a little too much. Sink did support the healthcare legislation earlier this year, but to be totally accurate, it was a healthcare makeover, not a healthcare takeover. But how much of it is fact and how much is fiction? Ring the bell. School's back in. Time for another truth test. We've been criticized, we've been complimented, both from the left and from the right. For the last 6 weeks, we fact-checked 6 major campaigns running ads in Tampa Bay. We graded each claim each ad made based on nothing but the facts and averaged them all together to give each ad a final score. Remember, we don't endorse candidates. We don't even care whom you vote for. We just want you to have all the facts. That said, here are the top 5 claims this season that blatantly ignored them. Number 5, Marco Rubio on politicians.
Politicians don't create jobs.
We discovered that politicians can create jobs. In fact, government is the single largest employer both in the state of Florida and in the country. Furthermore, Merriam-Webster defines a politician as a person experienced in the art or science of government. Rubio spent 8 years in the Florida House, so if he was trying to indicate he's not experienced in government and he's not a politician, he'd fail that claim too. Number 4, Kendrick Meek on the environment.
I'm the only one who's fought against developers draining the Everglades.
Meek's campaign points to instances where Rubio and Crist may have made decisions that hurt the Everglades. However, we found instances where they've made decisions to actually help Everglades restoration. The Meek campaign overlooks that fact, and it earns an F. Number 3, Charlie Crist on controversy.
Kendrick Meek steered government contracts to an indicted developer who then hired Meek's mother.
The Crist claim isn't so wrong on the facts it mentions, it's just got the chronology all wrong. Meek's been questioned about a relationship between his mother and a developer. However, it didn't go down the way the Crist ad suggests. It got an F2. Number 2, Kendrick Meek on benefits for seniors.
The only one against privatizing Social Security.
The Meek campaign points to a Marco Rubio comment in January saying privatization was a possibility. However, Charlie Crist, by and large, has always been against it, especially now. So Meek racks up another F. And the number 1 claim, Marco Rubio and Rick Scott on the stimulus.
The only thing missing? Jobs.
Big debts and no justice.
It may be the most significant and controversial issue of this entire election, but the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office indicated that the stimulus was directly responsible in 2009 for halting the free-falling jobless numbers. The number of private sector jobs has climbed every month in 2010, and private economists believe the bill saved or created more than 1 million jobs. The economy's bad, but the stimulus did create jobs. That's all we've got until this election, but with the next campaigns probably ready to kick off about November 3rd, our fact checkers aren't going very far. I'm Noah Pransky, and I approved this truth test.
This is the stimulus.
Marco Rubio's got his hands full here, and so do we as we try to separate fact from fiction. How much truth is in his most recent ad? We find out when it faces the truth test.
This is the stimulus. Billions in spending.
The most recent estimates from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office indicate the stimulus will cost $816 billion over 10 years. An A grade for the first claim.
Mountains of foreign debt.
About 2/3 of the U.S. debt is owed to foreign sources. That's a much higher rate than it's been over the last decade, but much lower than it was in the 80s. Regardless, we'll consider $9 trillion in foreign debt a mountain and give Marco another A.
And countless regulations that Congress didn't even read.
All right, so this one isn't the easiest to fact check. Well, we're sure someone in Congress read through the entire stimulus bill. We're also pretty sure that someone didn't. This claim doesn't get a grade, though. It's Rubio's opinion.
The only thing missing? Jobs.
This is similar to a claim we flunked Rick Scott on. That same nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said that the stimulus was responsible for halting the nation's free-falling unemployment rate. And economists estimate that the stimulus bill helped save or create 1 million jobs. While the nation's unemployment rate remains high now, it could have been worse without the stimulus.
Washington has it backwards. Politicians don't create jobs.
Merriam-Webster defines a politician as a person experienced in the art or science of government. Rubio's 8 years in the Florida Senate would seem to qualify him as experienced and thus a politician. But even that technicality aside, government is the country's largest single employer, so we find they can create jobs, and this claim just not true either.
And government spending won't create prosperity.
We don't need to waste much time on this one. It's an opinion.
We have to stop stimulus, balance the budget, and keep the tax cuts.
These are opinions as well, and while we commend Rubio for actually saying what he wants to do if elected, we find that some of his anti-government claims just aren't substantiated. Total up all of his scores in this 32nd spot from U.S. Senate hopeful Marco Rubio gets a C. I'm Noah Pransky, and I approved this truth test.
In this week's Truth Test, 10 News reporter Noah Pransky takes on a recent ad in a referendum debate that could reshape the region for decades.
Vote for jobs and transportation county-wide.
In its campaign to get a penny tax for transportation passed, the group Moving Hillsborough Forward has been running an ad touting the good things a past referendum could do. But how much of it is fact and how much is fiction? Ring the bell. School's back in. Time for another Truth Test.
The Countywide Transportation Initiative, $800 million for local roads.
The first claim that the ad makes is that the rail referendum isn't just for rail. 25% of those taxes would go toward local road projects too. And we crunched the numbers. That $800 million stat, 100% accurate. So this claim gets an A.
New crosswalks and bike lanes.
There's no fiction here. The penny sales tax would help fund intersection projects, but realize one thing, it's not in addition to the $800 million for local roads, it's included in that number. Nevertheless, this claim is also true.
Light rail and a bus fleet covering the whole county.
It could be 8 to 10 years before the first rail line is built, but the buses should come much quicker. Yes, they'll go to all corners of the county, and they'll possibly even extend to others. This claim, another A.
Every penny in a dedicated trust monitored by citizens.
The referendum mandates that a diverse 11-person oversight committee would look after the funds as they're collected through sales tax. And while these aren't just any normal citizens, they'll all be transportation experts, there's nothing misleading about this claim either.
And one of the biggest jobs programs in Hillsborough history.
This too is true, with the county projecting thousands of new jobs between construction of new projects and operation of new transit. So far, Moving Hillsborough Forward has taken a long ride on the truth train.
Vote for jobs and transportation county-wide.
We're all in this together.
We actually don't find a single thing false or misleading about this ad. The group that opposes the referendum says Moving Hillsborough Forward doesn't do a good enough job of explaining how high taxes would be if passed. But as for the claims in the ad, they ace the test, and this report card, worth hanging on the front of your refrigerator. I'm Noah Pransky, and I approved this truth test.
10 News reporter Noah Pransky puts Kendrick Meek's ad to the truth test.
I'm Kendrick Meek, the Democrat for Senate.
We're taking our job as fact checkers very seriously, but with 8 claims in just the 32nd spot, Kendrick Meek has us very busy. This week we put his ad to the truth test.
I'm Kendrick Meek, the Democrat for Senate, and with 3 of us running, you should know what makes me different. I'm the only one who's fought against developers draining the Everglades.
He's referring to a bill that Charlie Crist signed last year that made it easier for developers to build on wetlands. However, both Crist and Rubio over the years have supported their number of Everglades restoration bills, so this claim that he's the only one gets an F.
The only one against offshore oil drilling before and after the BP spill.
Meek has always opposed it. Rubio has always been open to it. Crist, on the other hand, opposed it before and after the BP spill, but also said he would be open to it before if it was clean enough, far enough, and safe enough. So Meek got the spirit of this claim right, but we can't quite give it an A.
The only one against privatizing Social Security.
Rubio straddled the issue over the years, while Crist hasn't said much about it at all. But a Crist spokesperson did tell me that the governor is against privatization, so this claim gets an F.
The only one who's pro-choice.
This one's easy. Rubio is pro-life. Crist says personally he too is pro-life. He just doesn't think any current abortion laws need to be changed. Claim is accurate. It gets an A.
We took on George Bush.
While Rubio and Crist are both on the record opposing some Bush policies, neither's really gone gone toe-to-toe with the former president like the Democratic congressman has. This claim also gets an A.
Who's far from middle-class tax cuts?
This one's open to interpretation. Meek is referring to the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, a bill that both Rubio and Crist have spoken out against at times. However, Rubio and Crist are also both for many across-the-board tax cuts that benefit the upper class, the lower class, and the middle class. So we have to give this claim, half true, a C.
Against high credit card fees and to raise the minimum wage.
These battles tend to originate in Washington, not Tallahassee, so it's much more Meek's alley than Crist or Rubio. As a result, both of those claims get an A. But because voters aren't getting the entire story on Meek's 8 claims, his ad trying to separate himself from the crowd in the U.S. Senate race gets graded a C. I'm Noah Pransky, and I approved this truth test.
Each week, 10 News reporter Noah Pransky takes a critical look at the ads in our truth test. This week, the governor's race.
Attention, Florida voters.
You've probably seen the ad enough by now to recite specific lines, but how much of it should you believe? This week, we put the anti-Alex Sink ad, sponsored by the Republican Party of Florida and approved by Rick Scott, to the truth test.
Here are your official orders from Washington.
I need you to raise money. I need you to walk and knock on doors, whatever it takes to make sure that Alex Sink is the next governor of Florida.
Well, pardon the tongue-in-cheek nature of the orders, but the speech came from the president's recent visit to the Democratic Party of Florida. It wasn't taken out of context, so it gets a passing grade.
Maybe that's because Sink supported Obama's government takeover of health care.
This one can be very misleading. Sink did support the health care legislation earlier this year, but to be totally accurate, it was a health care makeover, not a health care takeover. The wordplay means we dish out a C grade to this claim.
Or because Sink supported Obama's $1 trillion stimulus bill.
Sink did support the first stimulus, but according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, it's an $814 billion bill over 10 years. It only crosses the $1 trillion barrier when you factor in debt service, not traditionally used in this discussion. Because it's an apples to oranges comparison, we give it a B.
The one that gave us big debts and no jobs.
Once again, we go to the Congressional Budget Office, which said last year's stimulus package helped stabilize a free-falling unemployment rate. And many private economists say that the bill helped save or create more than 1 million jobs. Using Bureau of Labor statistics, we have to give this claim an F.
What will Obama do to make sure liberal Alex Sink is the next governor of Florida?
Whatever it takes.
While much of Sink's agenda matches up with Democrats, it may be misleading to call her a liberal. At least 3 major Florida papers have labeled her a moderate, pointing out her fiscal responsibility. This claim opinion, but given the number of places a voter can be steered wrong, the attack ad from the Republican Party of Florida and Rick Scott gets graded a C. I'm Noah Pransky, and I approved this truth test.